Today on Locked On Canadiens, is Patrik Laine going to be the difference maker in Montreal?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1128 of Locked On Canadiens. It is a sudden emergency episode we would normally be coming to you on a Wednesday morning as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day. And as you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. But today, we had to do an emergency episode because the Montreal Canadiens have made a massive trade. So if we're regularly your first listen of the day, today we're going to be your second listen of the day because we had an episode this morning. My name is Laura Saba, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian, and Ian is ecstatic. This is a player that he has coveted for the Montreal Canadiens for a very long time. Ian, how are you feeling in the wake of this Montreal Canadiens trade?
I think Kent Hughes got me my birthday present about a week too late, but I'm totally cool with that. Like, I was going through some of my old tweets, as you know, psychos do from time to time, and I had been tweeting about trading for Patrik Laine since like 2019. So it's very exciting to me that there's a lot of guys that we go after like that. I remember Shane Gostisbehere was one. They were like, he's going to come to Montreal. It's fun to actually get one of those now. Like, this is probably the first one in my lifetime that has actually landed. And like, I've been just buzzing since the news was announced this afternoon. It's been a really good day.
It's true that this is one of the only ones where the name is linked to the Montreal Canadiens, and it's usually to generate more interest, whether it's for a trade or for a signing, et cetera, et cetera. It's to increase, to drive up the price on a player. But let's get into that for a second, because the price is actually extremely reasonable. So the Montreal Canadiens get Patrik Laine and a 2026 second round pick. In exchange for Jordan Harris, no salary is retained. So Montreal's on the hook for the next 2 years for Patrik Laine's massive contract, which is above what Nick Suzuki makes, as one of the media members asked Kent Hughes. But all in all, we are going to talk about the return a little bit later. I think the first thing that I want to do is talk about, what does Patrik Laine bring to the Montreal Canadiens? And if you listen to what he has to say, he's ready to contribute. He's ready to come back. You know, he did come off shoulder surgery, but also he was in the player assistance program. But if you watch the press conference, his body language is relaxed. It's very chill. He's very excited. And I think it's really telling that both the player and the GM said whether he scores 40 goals or 20 goals in Montreal, what he wants to do is contribute to the team to get them to that next level. So it feels like either Patrik Laine was watching the press conference, or this is a conversation that they truly have had, as Kent Hughes stated, which is, Laine believes he can get back to being a 40-goal scorer. In fact, he said he could score 50 goals. He could get back to that, but that's not what the Canadiens are asking of him.
Yeah, I think they're just looking for a guy who has a very coveted skill set to come in and be a contributor on this team. I think the part of it that really both Laine and Kent Hughes mentioned was that he's going to come in and be a guide for a lot of the young offensive players that are coming in, which I thought was so funny because Patrik Laine is 26, and Kent Hughes kind of had a wry smile when he called him an elder statesman on the Montreal Canadiens, which I thought was very funny. It is true. I mean, like, he's, I hope they call him like Grandpa or something in the locker room. That would be really funny.
Grandpa Patty.
Yeah, Grandpa Patty. That we're gonna make that nickname stick. That's gonna be great. So I mean, he seems to think that Laine, that is, seems to think that he has more to offer than just his goal scoring. He says he's a very good playmaker. He says he knows how to play hard. He's 6'5", so like. Everyone who says, oh, the Canadiens forwards are too small, which I don't even understand how that's still an argument anymore. Like, that argument is demolished. It's gone. Throw it away. Like, because he's going to be playing next to probably Kirby Dach. Like,
yeah,
that's a big boy line. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of meat on that line. Mm-hmm. So like, it's really exciting because they got a player that a lot of teams would probably covet if it wasn't for the cap hit. and we'll get into that, I think, a little bit later. Like I said, to finally land a guy like that for the first time is just like, it's a breath of fresh air. Like we're not used to this at all. Although we should be used to Kent Hughes making a big trade in August. This is the third year in a row where he has woken up and chose violence one day, and he's decided that he's going to be the story. Taking a little bit of the spotlight away from the Oilers clearing cap space because of their own offer sheet situation. So the Montreal Canadiens won the day. It's a very exciting day to be part of this team, because you're starting to see, like, man, this forward group's good.
Not to call back to our previous episode, but there's two players you can get. It can be Cody Ceci or it can be Patrik Laine. Like, who wins that one? I think, one of the big things was that Patrik Laine himself, and this was a concern. We talked about this with our dear friend Jay Foster of Locked On Blue Jackets. We will have another crossover kind of talking about Jordan Harris and also, what other aspects of Laine's game Habs fans can expect. But when we did that crossover, there were a lot of Habs fans who said that's not necessarily what we want, right? There's a lot of issues attached to Patrik Laine, and the narrative was that he wanted out of Winnipeg and then he wanted out of Columbus. And I don't think that's necessarily true, because the situations are extremely different. And in Columbus, the situation truly was, and he said this in the press conferences before he even went into the player assistance program, he realized he needed a change of scenery, right? That was something that he needed. He needed a fresh start and a change of scenery, whether or not he'd gone into the program or not. And I think, he said many, many times that he praised the fans in Columbus, that it was not, Columbus was not the issue. And it was really that he needed a fresh start. And he's particularly excited about playing in Montreal because it is a high pressure market. Everybody's like worried, like he can't handle the pressure. Some players, they thrive on that. He seems to be that kind of person. And I think, he has a healthy ego. And by that, I mean, you can't be too down on yourself. If you're going to make the NHL, if you're going to be an elite player in the AHL, you have to kind of believe in your own mythology a little bit. And I really, you're talking about how he was talking about his playmaking skills. I truly feel that this is a player that has that skill to make beautiful things happen on the ice, right? It's obviously up to Marty and the team to complement that and to bring out the best in him. But he's not shy about that. He said himself, I truly believe I can get back to that, 44, whatever it was, 50 goal. He said 50 goals, right? We're going to see, right? I'm not expecting 50 goals from him, but he's expecting 50 goals from him. And that's what we need. He needs to have that positive self-image. Like, imagine having gone through a tough year and not being able to get back. Like to me, I look at a Josh Anderson, for example, right? He's had a tough couple of years, and his body language, everything about that screams that he's down on himself. Whereas Patrik Laine is like, no, you know what? I can get this back again. I can do it. And what better place than Montreal? Like, that attitude to me is so healthy. It's a healthy ego. It's not being too full of himself. And he does seem excited. And I do think that truly sometimes that mental aspect, like, he just needed a change of scenery. It's not like he was asking out of every market he's ever been in. That's not necessarily an accurate narrative in my mind.
No. And, I think the ego call is spot on, because he and Slafkovsky seem like they're cut from the same cloth. No, like just these big hulking guys who have a lot of talent, and they don't care that you don't, that you think they have a lot of talent. Like, they are just going to go out and be the guys that they are.
Yeah.
Do you remember Laine in the interview at the draft lottery, when he gave this interview and he was like laying down, like he was like from the beginning, he's been that dude.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a show. This is who Patrik Laine is.
He's just chill. He's just like I think somebody once called it, like, they said the guy's like talking to the media while playing on his PlayStation or something like that. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. He's out on a porch in Florida drinking out of a gallon jug of water. Like, he's just living his life. Like, people wondered about bringing him into the culture that the Canadiens have in that locker room. And, I think a lot of really uncharacteristic things were said about the way that he's handled his mental health issues. And, bravo to him. It's a tough thing to do. I've been there. Lots of us have. It's not a fun thing to deal with. I think because of the person he is, like, he's going to not only fit in that room, but improve it. Like, he's going to be a guy that, brings brevity when things get kind of rough. right? Like maybe make a joke at the right time, make the room a little light. Like, like we've seen Jeff Gorton do in those the draft videos, right? Like
Right.
that seems like the environment they want to have. So I'm so excited. I think the impact that he's going to have on this team outside of scoring is, going to make a huge difference for, this team's chances of winning a championship in the near future.
And we are going to get to the return in a second, but I did really quickly want to touch on the fact that Kent Hughes, he was asked, what makes you think that this is going to be, but it was I can't remember specifically the wording of this of the question, but it was asked, like, why do you think this is going to be a good experiment, right? Like knowing what we know or believing the narrative that's out there. And he said he has faith in that locker room, right? He said
Yep.
like it was the locker room that was the difference making factor in that decision, in that question. And so to me, like, I think that, they're making all these decisions and they're really, truly, they are doing that with the full knowledge that they want this locker room to be a certain way. And if he didn't fit, they would not have pursued him. I think that I truly, truly feel that if he didn't fit this particular locker room, if he was going to be a subtraction rather than an addition, they would not have pursued this player. Now, whether or not they're right remains to be seen. But I think that, I have faith in this front office that they know what they're doing, especially when it comes to that. But there's so much more to talk about. Like, they got a chance to talk to him, the return, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much more to get into in this episode. And we will do that in just one moment. Passion, drive, and patience. What makes your team the winning championships is also what makes your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, so we were talking about the Habs got a chance to talk to Laine before being traded. So let's get into the return a little bit and sort of how this all came about. Kent Hughes mentioned that they spoke to Laine over the weekend, and it was Jeff Gorton, Marty St. Louis, and Kent Hughes. Don Waddell, it seems unprecedented from what Kent Hughes was saying and from what we know of the NHL. It's unusual for you to get a chance to actually talk to the player that you're trading for. This must have been in the works for a while because Kent Hughes alluded to seeing paperwork, talking to medical experts, speaking to Laine. There seemed to be some hints in what he was talking about, saying like they might have spoken to people close to him. Potentially, he really didn't want to get into it, but potentially, former coaches or former teammates, et cetera, et cetera. They really, really did their homework. But Columbus did make it very easy for them. They allowed him, they gave him all of that. And to me, the fact that they weren't cagey about it was a really positive thing. Like, Don Waddell is somebody that we do generally, like, he's not somebody that is known for being shady. How about that? Like, that's not, and so the fact that they were so open about it, the fact that they allowed all of this to happen means, like, to me, it was like, okay, it was in good faith. But also, like, one thing that was mentioned, and I do believe, I can't remember if it's Elliot Friedman or not, was that the Habs were the only team who were allowing them to trade without having to retain salary. So obviously that does sweeten the deal. But the return is like in context, if you look at it, it's not that much, right? They're getting a Patrik Laine caliber player and a second round pick for their trouble. I think anytime the Habs are taking on salary, a pick has to come with it. And all they gave up was Jordan Harris. Jordan Harris is a favorite of this podcast. Like, I am actually quite sad about losing Jordan Harris. But in the grand scheme of things, this is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in his career, Jordan Harris is a replaceable defenseman. He's a guy that, you can find another one like him. I think the ceiling on him is a bit higher than we give him credit for. And, his agent, after he was traded, made a point to say, we thank the Canadiens. He loved his time in Montreal. There's a lot of defensemen on that, on the left side that might push for spots. Jordan needs to play.
Yeah.
And I think that this is an excellent opportunity for him to get out of a rotation and become a top 4 defenseman in the NHL.
Yeah.
We, like you said, we're Jordan Harris truthers. Like I seriously believe he's got middle pairing potential, power play potential. The way that he walks the blue line is like very underrated. But you're right. In the grand scheme of things, like if this works out the way that we think it does, we're getting a potential 40 to 50 goal scorer and a second round pick for a defenseman who was picked in the 3rd round. Wasn't Jordan Harris a 3rd round pick? So we've been like, even if Laine leaves in 2 years and it was a disaster, we've upgraded Jordan Harris to a 2nd round pick. Like, it's just kind of goofy. The salary cap kind of ruins a lot of stuff like this. It makes a lot of players look like they're not valued. The return is excellent. Like, they nailed it.
So let me ask you this. So, right, you and I have been predicting this. I've been predicting this since like the beginning of last season, right?
Yeah.
Last off season. In fact, I do believe that I was on a podcast before the season started, and they said, which player is going to get traded first, and I said it was going to be Jordan Harris. And did you think the return was going to be like an actual, not just like an NHLer, but like,
no.
Like I thought it would be like, we're going to lose Jordan Harris for like 2 4th round picks. That's really what I thought the return was going to be. So when you look at that, like, this is incredible. Like, this is like, just even getting, like you said, you upgraded him to a 2nd round pick, just even getting that is incredible value. And then you look at like what the Canadiens are getting, and it's just, like, it's such a tidy piece of work. I don't even know how to explain it. It's true he wanted out. Like, everyone knew that he was on the market. Like, the Columbus was hoping and expecting to trade him before September rolled around, right? That's no secret. But everybody was pitching. It's just that everybody wanted salary retention. And the Canadiens, honestly, like, I honestly don't know how they didn't hold out for more than Jordan Harris.
Yeah, and I think maybe a lot of that has to do with a certain guy who's in Columbus that had a little bit to do with the drafting of Jordan Harris and Trevor Timmins, right? He's there. That seems very important to bring up because he's a guy that would know him very well. So like I think the Canadiens did a really excellent job here. The weaponizing their salary cap space every year is becoming it's an area where the Canadiens have made serious gains on building out their assets for the future. They brought in Sean Monahan and they got a 1st round pick for doing so. They were part of the Erik Karlsson trade that they had to hold on to Jeff Petrie and Casey DeSmith for a little while and then shoehorned them away. And then
they got picks for their trouble, right?
And got picks in the process. Absolutely. And they were able to dump Mike Hoffman in that. Like, I think that gets forgotten that Mike Hoffman isn't here anymore. He's out in San Jose. So, like, I think it's also important to note, Arpon Basu asked this during Kent Hughes' availability, because this trade does put them just over the salary cap with Carey Price on the roster and not on LTIR. He asked, is that going to be possible for the Canadiens to get under the cap with Price on the roster? And Hughes says he believes it is. So there's probably something else, not imminent. I'm not saying there's going to be another trade tomorrow, but something else will happen where the Canadiens will be able to get under that threshold and be able to accrue cap space this season without Carey Price eating up all their LTIR space.
Right. And that was a really, like, it felt like a throwaway moment because he just said, yes, I believe so, or something like that. It was one sentence and then we moved on to the next question. But I think, to me, that's one of the biggest parts of this whole equation is what happens to the Canadian salary cap. And somebody did also ask, like, now this guy makes more than Nick Suzuki. And it was really funny because Ken Hughes was like, we didn't negotiate that contract. Like,
right.
That's not us, right? That's not a message that we're sending.
Right. But I thought that was interesting because, to me, that says if we were negotiating a contract, Nick is our cap. Which and maybe I'm reading the tea leaves a little too much there, but that was my first, like, Ken was very blunt. He said, we did not negotiate that contract. So he's kind of setting an internal cap, like, Nick is the top. Anybody else, you want to be here, you come in under that.
Yeah.
And if he can manage that without alienating players, I mean, this roster is going to be real comfortable for a really long time.
Yeah, and I think like the really important thing here too is that Nick Suzuki is not the type of player to care about that, right?
Right.
And that to me as well is like Nick Suzuki is going to do everything he can to help this team win and learn from this guy, right? And we always forget that Patrik Laine was second overall in a year that had Austin Matthews, right?
Yeah.
If Austin Matthews did not exist, Patrik Laine may well have gone first overall in that draft, right? Like you're talking about a guy and people are treating him like he's like washed. He's not. He's 26 years old, had injury troubles, had mental health issues. He's come back stronger than ever. And I just feel like the Canadians got so much. And like that's just Jordan Harris just helping the Canadians all over again. Like that's
Good guy,
like
Jordan
his
Harris.
last act is like, yeah.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, he now, there's now room for another defenseman to push themselves and get into this NHL lineup. And we're going to talk about who that might be in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about Indeed, because if you're hiring, then you need Indeed. And I got to tell you, like, hiring is one of the most difficult parts of my day job. It's so hard to find the right candidate. And so, what you need to do is stop searching, but start matching with Indeed. And if you need to hire, you need Indeed. It's your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a match engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. If you're looking for the right fit for your team, we're just talking about, what's the right fit for the Montreal Canadiens, that Indeed is here to help you. It's so easy. It does all the work for you, and all you have to do is match with the candidates and then make your selection. You can take all the guesswork out of it. It's just so easy. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, so it's not a secret that the Habs have a ton of young defensemen, lots of potential there, lots of guys hungry for a spot in the NHL lineup. And Jordan Harris being traded away is an opportunity for a lot of guys. So before we get into who or which, I really want to point out what Kent Hughes said. Somebody asked, was it a priority for you to clear a space in the lineup for a defenseman? And he said, no, that's not a priority because it's up to them to earn their spot in the lineup. But at the same time, this does allow more flexibility and more of an opportunity for someone to do just that.
Yeah. And, the perfect person for that, I think, is Brett Kulak, right? Like we talked about on Monday's show. I'm taking that L so hard. Anyway, yeah, I mean, they've got so many young defensemen. Jordan Harris, if he was here, he was going to be in that conversation, right?
Right.
But this is such a great problem for them to have. Like they solved two issues here. They cleared a backlog on defense and they added a, potentially top scorer. It's really tidy work. As far as which defenseman steps up, I think there's one answer to this for me. They cleared space on the left side. Lane Hutson shoots left. He has 2 points in 2 games in the NHL. It's Lane Hutson. He's gonna be a Calder finalist this year. Like I think that's where we're headed with this. Like he's gonna
You
play.
heard it here first. I truly like, and this is the thing, is like, is this our bias, Ian, talking, or is it truly that I think he's the most like gifted defenseman that's like close to making the NHL in the Canadiens prospect depth? There's no question about that. Like as much as Reinbacher's fantastic, as much as Logan Mailloux has really proven himself over the last year, et cetera, off ice issues, all of that stuff, the work that he's done, right? I think that Lane Hutson is just truly the most talented one out of all of them. And I don't think that's a stretch to say.
No, I don't think so either. He has a skill set that is difficult to replicate, not only in the Canadiens pipeline, but across the league. Like the guys we're talking about who can do what he does are like Quinn Hughes out in Vancouver and Kel McCarr. I don't think he's on the level of a Kel McCarr, but that's the kind of player we're talking about. And Adam Fox out of New York. Like that's really it. Like that's a difficult skill set to come by. Could you imagine if he was right-handed? Like, he'd be on the top pairing already.
Or
It's
like a few inches taller.
just if he was 5'11", he would have won the Calder last year. Like, it's but his bones are still growing. Remember the
Yeah.
doctor's note.
Yeah, he brought the doctor's note. That to me, like, that's when I fell in love with it. Like, that was like everybody was talking about his skill and his talent. I heard he brought that doctor's note to the combine, and I was like, that's it. Like, this is gonna be my favorite player in the NHL for a while.
Yeah, but to Kent Hughes' point, it's about the players having a threshold they need to clear in order to be NHL players. And while moving a guy out like Jordan Harris will create a little bit of, of an opportunity for one of these players, it's not gifting any one of them a spot.
Exactly.
They've got to show up to camp and win that spot because there's still too many of them. Even with this one move, some of these guys are not going to play in the NHL.
Right.
And that's not like I think I mentioned this on an earlier show. Like, if it were up to me, David Reinbacher lives in Laval this year.
Yeah.
Like, I don't just go chill there. We're not going to bother you. Go develop. He looked pretty good in Laval in the games he was there. I want to see him be really, really good in Laval. And people
But then, you know what? The Belleville Senators might try and beat him up and give him a concussion. And
he's big. He's fine.
can
I ain't
handle
worried
it.
about him. Stick him with somebody. Just make sure he's always on the ice with a guy like Riley McKay, who had like 1 million fights last year, and we'll be fine.
There you go.
Yeah.
But I think for me, another thing was that they didn't just move out Jordan Harris. You can't forget that they moved out. Oh my God, now I'm forgetting his name.
Kovacevic,
a while ago too, right? Like, these two guys were interchangeable to us, and like they got rid of both of them. And to me, like, it feels like, all right, they had that steady, keep the puck in the out of the zone, et cetera, guy. Now they want a little bit more. I'm gonna say pep. I'm gonna say a little bit more. Like, they want it to be more exciting back there.
Dynamic.
Like, they want it to be dynamic there. So I thought that was an interesting message, is that they're increasing the risk a little bit, but I'm thinking that the potential for reward is even greater, right? Like that's the thing. Like, when you're looking at somebody, like whether you're looking at Lane Hudson or Logan Mailloux, because as we've established, David Reinbacher is going to stay in the NHL. Whether you're looking at those guys, they're definitely a lot higher risk, but they do have that offensive skill set and that speed. And I'm not comparing them directly. I'm just saying that what they want is a little bit more offense, a little bit more excitement back there. And I think that's really, really interesting. And that's the way that they want to play this whole, like, look at the player they just acquired, right?
Yeah.
It's like, he's this goal scoring machine.
Yeah. And I in looking at them acquiring Laine and taking into account that they have a guy like Reinbacher, I thought it was interesting. They now have a former first overall pick in Juraj Slafkovsky. They have a second overall pick in Patrik Laine. They have a third overall pick in Kirby Dach. They don't have a 4, so someone's got to go out there and get a 4 from somebody. But then they have 2 5ths with Reinbacher and Demidov. So, like, if you're looking at a team that's rebuilding, like, you're supposed to live in that area of the draft. And
they didn't. They acquired these players without having to do that.
Yeah, I mean, 3 of those they got through the draft, which is still excellent work and great lottery luck that they never got pushed backwards. But they've done the thing that we've wanted them to do without even really spending the assets we thought they were going to need to give up. Exactly. Right? Like, we kept saying they're collecting all of these assets to make a play at a guy like what Patrik Laine can bring. And now they've done it and they still have all of those assets. Like, I'm kind of curious what happens now. Like, they're not going to draft players with all these picks, right? They can't. It's not possible. They don't have the space. So it's really interesting to see what's coming next for this team.
And this is the thing that's really telling, is that we said, and they said, not just we said, they said that next year's the year they're going to make the splash, right? So if this is not the splash, what is the splash? Like, what is coming in the 2025 off season? Like, I want to know, because like I'm very curious as to if this is like something where it's like it's a contribution, it's an improvement. Then what's the big move?
Leon Draisaitl, we went over this.
You heard it here first, everybody. All right, so this was a fun emergency episode. We are going to have another episode, so we are, technically down to our 3 days a week, etc., for the off season. But we do have another episode planned with our wonderful friend Jay Foster of Locked On Blue Jackets. We'll get a little bit more insight into Patrik Laine and what he brings. But in the meantime, please make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. We are free and available As you know, we thank you so much for making us your first listen and make your second listen of the day Locked On NHL, where they cover all things. We're probably going to be back there, Ian, like now that the Canadiens have made a big trade. You'll probably see us on there soon, but they have all the stories all around the NHL. They've got power rankings. They've got everything, so make sure you check them out. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. Oh, we're on Instagram. Locked On Canadiens on Instagram. Make sure I didn't even pitch it at the beginning of the show. And then obviously subscribe, tell your friends. You'll find me at The Active Stick. You'll find Ian at Maybe It's Ian, and you will find us here again tomorrow.